My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Night at One podcast, episode number 79. We've almost made it to 80. Happy St. Paddy's Day to all of you that are out there celebrating, which means you're not here joining us live. So you may or may not be having more fun than we are. Well, as a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst, and hoops player, an infamous, yes, that's infamous, rapper, our resident influencer and IG star shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, X, Instagram, all of the things, and check out the 70 plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle and the Big 12 Huddle. All right. So lots to talk about this week. We got a little bit of football news to talk about, especially who's not on the spring roster. We run a poll that we need to talk about. Basketball has ended its season, so we need to talk about those two games. And who's going to wear the crown? Is it UCF? UCF Baseball continues its winning ways at BYU, so we'll have to talk about that. We'll talk a little listener love and some other sports that Alan does not watch. Speaking of Alan, Nobra isn't here this week, but we do have Alan back from Jamaica. The only thing that I will say about that is, surprisingly, he does not have a tan. And here to explain himself, Alan Levin.
Well, you haven't seen the rest of my body, so I could have a tan, just not my face.
Okay, so you were just wearing like a mask the whole time and just showing your body at the beach? Is that what was happening?
Yeah, pretty much. I was just wearing a hat. I was wearing actually the Gus Malzahn UCF hat that covers like the entire face. So, but yeah, I actually got a pretty bad burn on my back and my chest.
That's funny. Yeah, speaking of Gus Malzahn, we may have seen him at the UCF basketball Big 12 tournament game. I don't know if you saw him, but there was a guy that was in a one of his patent advisors that looked exactly like Gus Malzahn. And for a moment there, I thought, hey, maybe Gus is back. Hey, look who we have that made it to the show. We weren't expecting Trey Neal. Welcome to the show.
I made it on time.
You made it on time. Yeah, I was surprised. I thought your trainee wasn't trained yet, and you were going to be in the operating room again.
I might have been driving like Paul Walker on the highway tonight.
As long as it isn't a Porsche, you're good to go. All right. Thank you and welcome to the show, man. Got some real interesting things to talk about. Actually, last week, a lot of people were interested in your thoughts on the football team, the culture. We talked a little bit about Beal and how he was talking about making sure that the team itself built that culture that they were looking for, making sure they had that effort, the personal relationship, all of that kind of stuff. So I'd love your comments on a little bit about that before we get into football with Alan. So can you tell us a little bit about why that culture, how Scottfrost made you guys feel that personal relationship, and what kind of difference it made for your performance?
He helped foster it in the sense that, like, what we realized just as we've looked back, we kind of had that relationship because of how hard it was with Coach O'Leary. Like, that was something we all bonded over. And I think a lot of just football players in general bond over that dying together, in a sense, like that those summer workouts, those spring workouts, the running at 5 a.m. in the morning, all that hard stuff, you kind of have that bond. We just didn't carry it over outside of football. So like, it was almost like a job, like, you clock in and best friends. We grind together, and after that, we kind of go our separate ways, which is what I've kind of hit on the most, as that's the most important part. Coach Frost organized events outside of it. He didn't say, "Hey, I'm making you guys hang out with each other." That was his intention, but he never said it. He's like, "Hey, we have a team event. This is what we're doing." Okay. And as the time went, we're like, "Hey, it's pretty fun to hang out with this guy." And then you pivot into that first year, and we had a blast hanging out with each other. Not as much as we did the next year, because we had a second year going into it, kind of know what's going on.
Well, I mean, it helps when you have an undefeated season going. I'm just saying.
I mean, even before we went undefeated, like that whole spring, summer, we hung out as a team a lot. Like we hung out pretty much every day, if not every other day. We were hanging out with each other, doing something. We were going bowling, we were going paintballing, we were just going to each other's house and playing video games. We'd have cookouts, things like that. So, and then obviously, like you're saying, when you're winning a whole bunch of games, it's even more fun to do that. So then the parties are more fun. Like you go out and they're a lot more fun. So it's just one of those things where that is the most important part. And Coach Frost is like, I can say he fostered that a lot. And he gives you the avenue to do that. He's like, "What are you guys doing?" Like he'll ask us, "What do you guys have planned this week, outside of football?" And we'd be like, "Yeah, we're going doing this. We're doing this. People are going to do there." That first year, it wasn't like that. Even with Coach O'Leary, he never really asked us, "What are you guys doing outside of here?" And just to see a coach take that interest in you, and that like he meant it. Like, what are you guys doing? And even Coach Frost came to some of these events. Like he came and went paintballing with us. He's been bowling with us. He wouldn't do it every time. And we wouldn't invite him every time either. But like it's just those things where you have that time and he understands it because he was one of the guys. Coach Frost was one of the guys. A lot of the coaches he hires.
Well, let me ask you this before you go forward, right? Like, all right, what kind of bowler was Scottfrost? Was he any good? Was he bowling 200? We all know he's super competitive.
He wasn't that good, but he's uber. He is uber competitive. I mean, he wasn't like professional bowler, but he's a competitive guy. I mean, he wants to be good at everything. And I think that's most guys. That was most of the guys on the team. Like nobody wants to be the worst. We all want to be the best. And I think that's like an internal motivation that most of us as athletes have. But yeah, I mean, I think just him being that, and like I just said, he was in these locker rooms before. He's been in those locker rooms. He understands that, and he's done it at the highest level. So he understands that's what it takes. And he leans into that, which is why, sometimes one thing I've realized, even though he didn't hire this exact same coaching staff, like people didn't want that and understood, he's still hiring guys who've played, who have been in that environment for long periods of time, who understand, what it's like to be 18, 22 years old as an athlete. And even more so today, like it's 1,000 times harder. So just having somebody in your corner that allows you to try to foster that, you play football, but there's a lot more to you than that. Embrace it with the guys that are going through the same thing. So like, I think he's the perfect person to foster that. And that should,
So Trey, you talked a lot about what you didn't see last year with Gus's teams on the sideline and that brotherhood and stuff when you were visiting. Tell us a little bit more about that. Give us about 2 or 3 minutes on that, and then talk a little bit about how that closeness made a difference in games. Like, what was it specifically in games for the culture he was fostering that gave you guys that extra little strain, as we talk about on here quite a bit, that led to that success?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big accountability guy, and not necessarily like show up to class on time, blah, blah, like not necessarily like that. I was big because I understood, just since I was in high school, the way I was taught is when you play defense, offense, you're one key in the cog. Like your position is no more important than this person's position. And we understood that. But like, if I did my job wrong, it could let up an 80-yard touchdown. If you do your job wrong, it can give up 80-yard touchdown. If we all do our jobs right, most of the time, it's going to be a positive play for us. So I was big on just do your job. I don't care how you do it. Just make sure you're in the right gap. Make sure you're looking at the right stuff. And that's how a lot of the guys on our team are. And with that and the relationship building and all of that, what I didn't see, like, we got in a lot of arguments. You might not have seen them all the time. And we were really good about hiding it, but like we barked at each other. That's what we call it. Like, we're arguing back and forth, and it's not to undermine somebody or demean somebody. It's you're passionate about doing your job. Like, we know when somebody messed up because
are we talking about in practice, or are we talking about in games? Because like in practice, I mean, you get heated, you're tired, especially late in practice. You know, offense is playing the same guys all the time versus in defense. You know, you hit, you know, you told the boxing glove story, you know, things like that.
I mean, I'm saying even in games, like, we get to the sidelines and guys are pissed if, say, a touchdown broke and we don't know why. Like, we have the perfect call to it. Most of the times, like, that second year, our coaches did not come over to, like, tell us what we did wrong, because we had so many guys that would correct each other on the sideline and just leadership that they didn't need to do that. They would let us handle our business, and then they'd come, all right, this is what we're doing next drive. We solved out our issues. We solved out our problems, and we solved out all of that ourselves. That's what I always harped that I never understood when I was on the sidelines watching Gus-led teams. Something bad would happen, and everybody would come sit on the bench like nothing bad just happened, and nobody would take that leadership. Nobody would say, hey, you messed up, fix it. Nobody would say, hey, that's my fault, fix it. Like, we got to that point where we'd come to the sidelines and like, that was on me. That's my fault. And you didn't even have to bark anymore, because guys were like, listen, you're going to mess up. That's fine. Own up to it. Don't act like, you know, don't go hide. Don't be scared and act like it's the end of the world. No, just own up to it. We know you're going to take accountability. And I feel like that's what I saw that was missing. And I mean, when you hear the stories that you say, like, he didn't want guys working out hard, I think that's a part of not having accountability. What program do you not lift weights hard? Even in the professionals, you lift weights hard. You know, and I think that's just an accountability thing amongst each other. How can you perform on Saturday, Sundays, whenever you play, and you don't even put your body in position to perform? You know, that's what working out is. That's what practice is. Practices, I've always said, they're harder than that. So when you get to the games and, you know, you're down 14, guys are giving up big plays, or they're giving up huge sacks, and nobody says anything. The coaches have to come and yell at you. To me, that's not the environment that fosters. Just, I don't think that's the kind of, that's not how football's played. Football's not supposed to be coaches yelling at the players.
The other side of
that, taking care of it.
The other side of that too, though, is a lot of times in your guys' years, you guys were in each other's ears. Because I was like, whether it was away games, well, like in Maryland, I was at Maryland when you know, you guys were playing there. I was like right behind the bench, right? So you know, even in games like that, there were guys that were like pulling each other up by the bootstraps, and not just barking at each other, but also like if they had a bad play, you would see defenders over there, you know, talking up the offense, or vice versa. You'd see offensive guys talking up the defense, right? So there's that part of it too. Did it feel like, and part of this is NIL and stuff too, but did it feel like that cohesion wasn't there when you were on the sidelines with them, did it feel like these guys like just didn't care, right? Because they know they're 1 or 2 year players, and that's it. I mean, did you get that vibe that, you know, it was a different vibe because of today's NIL market and transfer market and everything like that? And did you get that same vibe I did, that they weren't picking each other up like you guys did?
I for sure they weren't picking each other up. It was almost as if they were enemies, in a sense. Like, if the offense was bad, the defense would get mad, or if the defense did bad, the offense got mad. That was never us when we played. It was, I mean, especially away games. Like home games, okay, whatever. Like, you know, we don't have to lift you guys up because the crowd's going to lift you up. You're at home. You're in your comfort zone. But like away game, like you're saying, Maryland, like, we're all we got, man. Like, that's it. I specifically remember like a lot of our close games that year. If one side of the ball, you know, something happened, the other side would come over and be like, we got y'all, just, you know, next drive, y'all just worry about next drive. That is always encouraging when your offense comes after a defense. Or like, I remember when Navy game, I think McKenzie had a bad interception, and like his shoulders started slots. I'm like, dude, we're gonna need you to make a play. That's how it always ends up being. We're gonna need you to make a play. We're gonna come out here and get a stop. You got to make a play. And I think just even those little things, that's what you need with your teammate, especially when you're on the road, especially when, you're down 7 and when you have all this expectation of performing, and I think NIL changes it a little bit. I think the problem with NIL is when it gets bad, it's going to get a lot worse than I think for us even it would get, because it really turns to every man for himself. I only care about my bottom line. At least 0-15 season our year, shoot, yeah, we wanted to win games and it was like every man for himself, but we still went out there like at least we can compile stats. Like it was every man for himself trying to do our best on the field. NIL is like, I'm not about to hurt my bottom line. I'm just trying to put on some good tape so I can like we never thought of those kind of things. So it's like a different door opening in their brains to what they think about. But again, there's teams that, Ohio State just won the national championship and they essentially bought their entire team. It can work. It's just guys have to be bought in. And I think that's just what makes it harder. Which I don't know if Coach Frost is going to necessarily go like the Gus route of, trying to go year to year and just rent guys each year.
Well, he's been very vocal about saying that he wants to build from high school, right? And whether that's reality or it's just by necessity, based on where we are in the NIL universe right now, or if we're waiting a little bit on that because of rev share, or whatever it is that is the reason for it. But he said all along that I feel like we talked about this a little bit already in a previous show, but I feel like all along he's basically been saying, I want those guys from high school so I can build that culture that they're bought in on and not buy a rental, because they will never truly buy in. So in those tough spots, they're not going to be there for their brother to the left and the right. And he said, even if it's, and he threw some subtle shade at Gus when he was saying some of those comments, right? But at the end of the day,
I think it's everybody. Like, I think there are teams, there's people who, like, there's coaches who are like, I'm going to buy my team every year. Now, Gus, I think that's what he ended up doing. I don't know if it's like direct shade at Gus, because there are a lot of coaches out there.
It was when Frost said it. He absolutely was trying to throw shade at Gus.
I don't know. I don't know if it was like direct shade. It might be. I can't speak for it. I just, to me, I know that guys think that's the blueprint. And even when, like, I don't even have a problem with getting guys, because even you look at our 2017 year, like Mike Hughes was there for 6 months, and he was a integral part of our offense, of our team. But like, I think when your core is strong, when you have like a good base foundation, which is what I think he's more so hinting at, you can inject a couple of guys in different places. You can.
Well, that's the key. It's a couple of guys, not the entire. Like,
you can't do the entire. Yeah, and I think that goes for any sport anywhere. You can't just buy a brand new team everywhere at every position and expect them to gel year one. I think that's impossible.
Mike Hughes is a special player. He just got signed again in the NFL. You know what I mean? So did Richie Grant, by the way. Just saying. But Mike Hughes he's still in the NFL. So he was a special athlete. He was not just a good player and good defender, but he was a special athlete. Reservation for 6. Need I say more? You know what I mean? That guy was just special. But the core group of the players, you mentioned it, there was a lot of guys from that 0-15 team on there.
Yep.
Right. And you had the O'Leary influences, but I really think the biggest difference was in those tough games, you guys never expected to lose. And a big reason for that was because of that relationship that you guys built. So,
and it's the confidence too. It's because we had a lot of close games year one, and we won some, we lost some. I think once you win close games, you expect to win close games. When you lose close games, you might not expect to lose them, but you don't expect to win them. I think every one of those close games, we were like, we're winning. where somebody's gonna make a play. I don't know who it is. Somebody's going to make a play to win this game. And I think
that's why you weren't sitting on the bench. You were over there telling the other people and hyping them up, right? Like when you saw last year's teams, what did you see them? They went back to the bench. They looked pouty. They didn't say anything to each other. And I know you mentioned that when you saw it on the sideline, and you were like, you can't win a lot of games this way.
Correct.
Not when you're
not when you don't even expect, like you're just defeated in a sense. And that's where we talk about Dylan risk in it, like just the jolt of energy he brought. He expected to make every play. Now, it was kind of detrimental because sometimes he'd do too much, and that kind of caught up towards those last few games he started playing. But, like, he had the confidence, like, okay, we're down. I'm going to go make the play. You know, I'm going to go try to make the play or get the ball to the person to make the play. That kind of confidence when that's everybody is contagious. And I think people, like I said, they gravitated toward that towards the end of the year. Like, he was just out there having fun, trying to make plays. Everybody loved it, so they started trying to make plays. But you need more than just him. You need it to be contagious to where you are weird not doing that. You know, you stand out like a sore thumb not doing it. Dylan Risk stood out because he was being a good teammate. You know, it should be the opposite. You should stand out for not being a good teammate, you know. So that's just, to me, I think Coach Frost was great at fostering that. You know, if he didn't we talk about the awesome offense. It put up a lot of points. But to the guys, we knew we could do that. And you saw they did it with Coach Heupel the next year. So it's not necessarily the scheme. It's the confidence and the culture he built. And then we see it, like, we haven't gotten back to that. You know, we've seen flashes, but it hasn't gotten back to that. And I think that's going to be the hardest part for me for Frost to recreate. It's not necessarily the points and stuff, because teams can score a lot of points. It's, can you get that culture back to where it's just exciting to play and guys want to be there and play?
Well, the accountability aspect of it too, because you guys had the accountability aspect from George O'Leary, right? So that's going to be a new wrinkle he's going to have to, but when you guys were there, and this is something we talked about at the time, we talked about since, when you guys were there, you had that accountability aspect from George O'Leary.
Oh, yeah.
And so when Frost came in, it was the right mix because he didn't have to be that way, because you guys were already of that mindset. You were holding each other accountable. You were looking at at technique. You were already there. Now this time around is going to have to do both. And what's interesting is the knock on Frost when he went to Nebraska by the Nebraska people was, hey, he's too easy on the team. And then you kind of, as the losses mounted, you saw him shift, and then it all just became a ball of negativity. And then when he came in here the second go around, he was very, very specific and said, I can't recreate what I did before. And as a coach, you mature and you understand what works and doesn't work. So you take bits and pieces to put it together. Now, that being said, I did hear a lot of construction equipment at practice the other day. So they weren't playing the music, but they're back to playing the music again at practice as of yesterday. So that was pretty fun and exciting, because that's one of the things, that swag, man. When you have that swag as a team, it's part of the music, part of that. I mean, and we talked about it back then. It was like the Miami teams in the 2000s, right? They had that swag. Now, you guys weren't showing up with camo, at a big game.
We weren't that crazy, but we had an edge to us. Like we had a confidence that was borderline cocky. Like, we teetered that line about us when we played. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Like, when we got to week 4, week 5, and we realized really how good we are. We're like, after we beat Memphis the way we beat Memphis, we're running the table. Barring injuries, we're running the table. Now, I don't know if we're going to get, top 10, whether we land with that, but we're running the table until we probably have to play them or USF again. That's what we were thinking. So, we truly felt like the Beatles. We went to every stadium, every game thinking you guys are coming here to see us. We went to SMU. The only reason this place is packed out is because you want to see us. We went to Temple. All those games, we're we are the main event. And with that edge, we performed to that edge as well. And I mean, I remember like SMU, we were dancing in the fourth quarter. Like normally at the end of the fourth or third, everybody comes to the sidelines, huddles. We're like, coach, we're good. We know we got them. Like we got them. So we were just having fun. Like that was us. And again, that's just, I don't know.
You guys had the sideline celebrations. You had a punter with flowing locks that was doing golf swings that he kind of became famous for. Or you had guys bowling on the sideline. You had guys with the paddles, like shocking people to life on the sideline. It was fun, right?
Yeah, but and even the sense of like when we were playing 0-12, those guys did not play a lot. Like that's why people don't even necessarily know their names. I remember, all of them. But people wanted to, like, they didn't care if they didn't play. They wanted to be on the field just to be a part of that. They wanted to dress out legitimately just to be a part of that on the sideline. They didn't care if they didn't play on Sunday or on Saturday. They truly didn't. They were like, listen, I'm going to go so hard in practice that Coach Frost will be like, hey, you're the scout team guy of the week. You're traveling with us. That's how, like, the culture that he kind of fostered. Because I promise you, when we were 0-12, nobody was trying to travel all the way out, to Temple, all the way to Cincinnati to get beat by 50 and come back and we waste our weekend. That nobody wanted to do that. And guys wanted to do that, so.
All right, Alan, we're going to test your mic because if not, we've got to talk a little bit about UCF's and the Big 12's upcoming pro day. Can we hear you? Nope. All right. He's going to keep working on those technical difficulties that were going on. We'll try that again later. However, Big 12 Pro Day starts in. Yeah, you're there. You're good. Go for it. Take over.
Awesome. All right. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, as Roger just got into a little bit here, Big 12 Pro Day starts in Frisco, Texas tomorrow for the next 3 days, and it's a pretty extensive list of UCF players that will be in the Pro Day. A lot of them, mostly starters from this past year. So just a quick rundown. You have Ricky Barber, Ethan Barr, Dalen Dodson, Amari Kite, Deshaun Pace, Josiah Pierre, Brandon Adams, Sheldon Arnold, Gerard Baker, Penny Boone, Quadric Ballard, Kobe Hudson, Jacoby Jones, and a few others that are going to be at the Pro Day. Obviously, we've kind of already seen who are the top expected guys to get drafted. We know, obviously, RJ Harvey's up there. Obviously, just had a really good performance at the Combine. Kobe Hudson performed pretty well as well. And then we know our combo of DBs. Brandon Adams had a really strong pro day as well as Mac McWilliams. So those look like to be the 4 draft hopefuls. I don't think anything's changed there, but obviously the pro day could solidify that even more. But there was guys that were talked about prior to the season that were, expected to be drafted. One of those guys, like Ricky Barber, was someone that was talked about a lot prior to the season. One that was talked to during the season and before the season was Deshaun Pace, who had a pretty good year. I mean, started out strong and kind of fizzled out a little bit at the end there. But I don't see a reason why a decent portion of these guys could probably get some UDFA love, undrafted free agent, maybe sign some small contracts, get a look in mini camps and things like that. But I think we know kind of the big 4 who, by most outlets you look at, even whether it's on NFL.com and their draft previews, as well as other outlets like ESPN and CBS Sports, several NFL draft specific media outlets have pretty much looks like a lock that RJ Harvey is going to be probably a 3rd, maybe 4th round pick. And then Mac McWilliams and Brandon Adams seem to be around the 5th to 7th. And then Kobe Hudson looks to be either, a final kind of day pick or, a priority free agent if he goes undrafted. But I think with some of these guys, there's some chances that a few other guys with a significant pro day could either boost their chances of being a late round pick or at least getting some love after the draft as a undrafted free agent. We see it every year with UCF. We usually have one or two guys drafted, and then 6, 7, 8 guys will sign undrafted free agent deals. Usually a lot of them don't stick, or maybe they'll go into a practice squad. We saw Tremont Morris-Brash, for example, had became a really strong undrafted free agent for the Chargers and ended up playing a little bit and is on their practice squad now, and a really good preseason for them. Was actually surprised he didn't make the team, but some of these guys will definitely make the roster, and this could arguably be the top UCF draft since 2000. I think it was 18 when it was 21 when they had 5 guys drafted in the same draft. Was that 2021 or 2018? I might be mixing up my years when it was like Trey Nixon, it was a bunch of guys that were drafted all there, Tay Gowan, Richie Grant, all those in the same draft there. So if we get 4 guys drafted, I think that would be the second most we've ever had in a single draft.
Yeah, what's interesting to me as I kind of look at this list, right? A lot of the guys that you mentioned that were at the combine are going to be here at this event as well. So they're clearly trying to boost their stock, right? So Mac McWilliams is listed that he's going to be there. Brandon Adams is going to be there. And Kobe Hudson's going to be there. So it'll be interesting to see if any of those guys can boost their stock. I mean, who would have thought that Kobe Hudson would be a 7th rounder UFDA type of person after last year, right? Player after last year. Some other big names that will be interesting for me. I think Ethan Barr is prototypical NFL linebacker, except for the fact that he's a little slow. So I think that might hurt him as far as his pro day is concerned, but he's a Mike linebacker. So he's pretty much going to be filling the gaps and not really there in coverage. So he might be okay there. Josiah Pierre is another one that was a pretty strong contributor. I think he could make a name for himself at the combine or at the pro day. And then, the other one that really kind of jumps out to me, besides Mac McWilliams, is Ladarius Tennyson. I think Ladarius Tennyson, he came up from, I think it was Middle Tennessee State, and played pretty well. I think he would have benefited for another year in the Big 12 just to kind of establish a name for himself. But if he has a really, really strong pro day, there may be an opportunity for him to kind of jump up there as well. Johnny Richardson's going to be participating. Unfortunately, I think Johnny's size is going to hurt him. Otis Anderson, was doing well in the NFL before everything happened with him. But he was a different set of he was just bigger. Yeah. His skill set was just different. So, I know Johnny was hurt a little bit there, but he's a smaller scat pack type, but he doesn't have the ability for yak as much as what Otis did. And he wasn't as durable as what Otis is. So he
like Adrian Killens, who pretty much same kind of mold that kind of felt, made it with the Eagles roster and actually played in an NFL game, but kind of, obviously didn't have the size to stay, and kind of jumped around and got cut a bunch and didn't really last.
Yeah, same kind of vein. So unfortunately, I think I hope the best for Johnny, but I'd be surprised if he ended up. He might be invited to a camp, but I think Johnny, unfortunately, his UCF career was the end of his career, and I hope not, because you always want to see guys achieve their dreams, right? Trey Neal, he had a couple of workouts with Atlanta and a few other places, but now he's talking to us. So how the mighty have fallen. I'm just saying.
I tell people, man, it's when you get to those tryouts and those workouts, you really see like the gap of like college talent. Like I thought I was a good college football player. I wasn't Mike Hughes, I wasn't an elite guy, but I was a good college football player. But like the NFL is 10 jumps. A lot of the guys that I played with and saw play, I'm like, man, these are really, really, really good college football players are like fringe NFL guys. Like you talked about earlier, these guys that are signing second contracts, some of them third contracts in the NFL, are really, really talented football players. Like those are the 1% of the 1% guys. Like Richie Reese getting a contract out in San Fran. That's like some people fizzle out after one contract. Mike Hughes, I think he's on his third contract. Like that's elite. Shaquille Griffin, like those guys that can play that long. I mean, props to them because again, it's easy to get in. That's what they always say. It's hard to get in. It's harder to stay. So props to those guys.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Shaquille, right? Because Shaquem gets all the love, right, for a lot of different reasons, right? But Shaquille's still playing. He was with Minnesota, I think.
Yeah,
and the Seahawks too. I think he was with the Seahawks.
Last year he was with Minnesota. He played with Minnesota the whole year last year.
Yeah, and he's with Jacksonville now. So, Shaquille.
No, he was. Did he sign with Jacksonville?
I think that's the latest team he's
been in his career. That was his big contract that he got after Seattle, when he was drafted to Seattle. Then he went to Jacksonville. Then he might have gone back to Jacksonville. I can check right now.
I know he went Seattle, big contract in Jacksonville. Then he went to Houston for a year. And then
he's back on the Jags. Yeah, Roger's right. He's back on the Jags.
Wow. Yeah, I know he was with Minnesota last year, so he's back.
Back Jacksonville loves UCF players. Like if Trey couldn't get on Jacksonville's roster, then that
tells you how good I was.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. A good college player. I'm joking with you, man. All right. Yeah, but nobody talks about Shaquille anymore, right? It's like Shaquem takes all the vacuums up all the air in the room for good reason. I mean, he's a great ambassador for UCF. He's a great ambassador for the NFL. He was a great ambassador for folks that are working with disabilities. But Shaquille Griffin is a successful NFL player, and we don't talk about him ever.
What? Sorry to interject. Yeah, sorry. He's not. I'm sorry. For some reason, Wikipedia does say Jackson, but now that I'm looking, he was on the Vikings last year, but he now he's a free agent. So I see there's an article here that the Packers are looking at him, but he's right now actually is a free agent.
Yeah. Okay. 8 years, man. I think this is gonna be if he signs somewhere, it'll be his 9th year. Like
that's good, real good.
Almost a decade in the NFL. Like that's really good.
That's making money. Yeah. All right. So speaking of free agents, we had another free agent that came and visited this weekend. That might be the QB of the future. Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Kane Archer?
Yeah, this is when you talk about, a Frost getting his Milton, or just any QB type of coach like a Frost or a Heupel that, they all want their guy. Generally you see, it's very rare, I feel like, when there's a coaching change for the incumbent to win out the job unless they were just an absolute stud the year before, like when obviously Mackenzie Milton, when Josh Heupel came in, or even Dylan Gabriel, when Gus Malzahn came in for the first year, where they have no other choice but to obviously start that person. But, for Dylan Risk, obviously he didn't prove, enough to be the guaranteed lock at starter. Obviously
he's also a pro style quarterback, right? And correct. I'm going to guess if you look at who Frost brought in and who Kane Archer is, he's not a pro style quarterback. He's more of a dual threat type quarterback. Both of them are.
That's right. No, that definitely is correct. He has a dual threat, which we know that's what Frost, obviously, the mold that he likes. So this could be, Frost's first quarterback as his second stint at UCF. So he's a 2026 prospect, came in for his visit yesterday, met with Mackenzie, met with Frost, obviously went around campus for an official visit. This is a guy who's out of Arkansas, actually. Interesting, not place that we normally target, I would say. I guess a little bit Gus did, but recently not too much. 6'1", 205, is ranked the number 11 player in the state of Arkansas, and is actually considered a top 40 QB in the entire country by 247 composite score. And he's a top 600 player in the nation overall, depending on the outlet you look at. Already has a long list of offers, over 20, I think it's 24 offers, includes Florida State, Texas A&M, Utah, Missouri, Minnesota, Michigan, Louisville, Kentucky, so Arizona. So there's quite a lot of offers in there for this 2026 prospect, and he is high on UCF. I wouldn't say he's crystal balled or anything for UCF, but he is definitely considers UCF high among his list, and seems like there's a connection there with Frost. So this would be, I would say, Coach Frost's first splashy kind of high school get, and obviously in his second stint here. Didn't have a lot of time there to fill out the 2025 class when he came in and got the job. So obviously 2026 is his first full class as the head coach, and this would be a real good start to it. A guy that's a top 40 QB in the whole country, high 3-star, 4-star, depending on which one you look like, but he's pretty much kind of fits that 4-star mold, a dual threat guy.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with him, he's 6'1", right? So if this guy was 6'3" or 6'4", he'd definitely be a 4-star. I still think he may get his 4-star based on the offers that he's getting, and he's got another season to play. The last 2 seasons, he led his high school team to state championships, right? So this guy's in their top level as far as high school football. So he's a pretty good QB. What I found was interesting. I read an interview that Brandon Helwig did with him. A couple of things kind of stuck out to me. One, it looks like KZ was actually on him early, and may have been on him as early as Tennessee. And this was like a guy that he really, really wanted. So January 27th, they really connected and had longer conversations, right? So KZ sees a lot of him in his game, in his high school game. And what's interesting is, as Kane also said, that watching KZ's film, it's kind of like who he wants to aspire to, right? So there's always going to be that comparison, especially now that KZ is QB coach, right? But this is a guy that he wants, and this is, I think, KZ's first real go at being able to go out and say, hey, this is a QB that a top priority QB that I want. And it seems like he fostered that relationship. The other thing that Kane said was, he said of all the other visits that he's been to, like the facilities and the campus and everything, this was by far better than the others. And he's visited some top P4 schools already before he came to UCF. So for him to say that, and he seemed really excited, and the kinds of things he was saying it, how effusive he was in what he was saying about UCF. I agree with you, Alan. He does really seem like he wants to be here. So obviously recruiting season is a long way to go, but this guy seems like the relationship he's built with KZ is pretty strong. And we'll see what happens with the old Gus bus now that it's moved on to FSU, since he's been on campus there, and that Arkansas connection that Gus has. I'm sure if he wants him, he'll be leaning on that pretty hard. But I do think with this guy being dual threat, I think KZ knows what he's looking for, what Frost is looking for. I think those are all positive things for us. And going to Arkansas is certainly interesting. That's a place I was not expecting us to go for, but that kind of shows you the depth that they're looking for the talent that we're trying to get in here that's going to fit the system that we're trying to build. And he, the other thing I just thought about this, Kane also mentioned he was there for practices. He was there for QB. He was in the QB room for a while. And he made a comment where he said, our offense is really balanced, which was interesting, right? Because the way that our offense ran in 2017 wasn't as balanced, maybe on yardage, but the number of plays that we played pass versus the run game wasn't balanced. So it was really interesting to hear him say that, especially early on, since they're now just installing the basics of the offense. And then the other thing that kind of came out was the 2025 spring roster. Alan, why don't you tell us what was interesting about that?
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of surprises. I would say overall, obviously the guys that we expected to be there, the transfers, the high school players, were all there. The interesting thing was there was two notable admissions in my mind. The biggest one being Jacoby Jones, and I'd like to defend myself here. On my page, I put before this came out, I put that Jacoby Jones was not returning, and everyone I got like 15 comments saying, "What are you talking about? He's returning. I already announced it." I had heard differently, that he wasn't returning. There was some questions on his eligibility, but he has played, when you consider all the red shirts, injuries, everything, he has played 6 total years. So from what I understand, he has exhausted his eligibility. However, he is in the process of fighting it, trying to get a return. But he's also, I guess, entered the going to be on the pro day, so it's a little confusing. From what I see, it does not look like he's returning. There were some people that thought he was going to come back, and there's also different rules in play here with COVID year and all this different stuff now that's happening now in college football. But he was not on the spring roster, so unless something changes, Jacoby Jones will not be back, which is a shame. He would have been by far the most experienced wide receiver returning, and the only wide receiver that's seen the field or had a touchdown for that matter in a for an FBS school. Obviously, we have gotten some transfers from D2 that have played and stuff, but he played at UCF and had a very, very strong finish to the year. Easily became UCF's wide receiver 2 after Kobe. Towards the end of the year, especially when Risk came in at quarterback. So he was off, and then the other one, which is not notable in terms of production on the field, but Cam Moore, who's obviously Bam Moore, former UCF DB Bam Moore's little brother, has been on the team for 3 years. Initially, when Coach Malzahn left, he announced that he was in the portal. Then when Frost got hired, he announced he was returning, and now he is not on the roster. So it looks like he ultimately decided to transfer or retire or leave. That either way, he's not on the roster. So nothing too crazy there. Nothing that we didn't possibly expect, except for the Jacoby thing. There was some possibility that he was returning, maybe could still return. But overall, everyone else, all of the transfers, all the 29, I believe, or 30 transfers that we landed are on the roster here for spring, enrolled in classes. All of the high school signees, at least the ones that have graduated early, are going to be here. Obviously, are on the spring roster, going to be here in the summer, or are here now, I should say, and the rest will be here during the summer. So rosters, obviously filling out. I think the total was 107 players on the roster currently enrolled in classes at UCF.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a crazy number, right? Let's thank you for that update. There's going to be more to come as spring kind of unfolds, especially with the spring break. Spring game. My kids are in spring break, which is why I'm in Orlando right now. But the spring game is coming up, and there will be a spring game with an open practice. In place of the spring game, right? So the open practice is coming up in early April. So it'll be interesting to see what insights we get from there, other than analyzing 2-minute clips of quarterbacks throwing balls for, plays that are pretty much set up for them in a practice where you can't hit the quarterback. So all of those armchair quarterbacks, we know that you're just missing football. But that's really all we have to update you on now. I don't know why I'm tripping over my words all of a sudden. All right. With that being said, let's go ahead and pivot to our pivot poll. And then we'll talk a little UCF hoops. There's lots to talk about there. So what we asked last week was it time? We asked our viewers and our listeners, was it time to part ways with Johnny Dawkins? It was interesting because it went from 90%, and then it was going down to like 60%. And then it was like 63%. And then all of a sudden it jumped back up as more people became aware of the poll. It ended up as 75% of the listening and viewing audience say that it's time to part ways with Johnny Dawkins, which is interesting because of something we'll talk about in the basketball side of things, which is the crown. and the timing that goes along with that. So that may be an indication of where Terry's head at. But as of right now, 75% of you say that it's time to part with Johnny Dawkins. This week's poll, and I'm going to put that out after this drops. One of the things that was interesting, if it's time for relocations right now after Ticketgate, people are doing the relocations, and there's a ton of relocations open, way more than usual as a season ticket holder. So I'm wondering, and it'll be interesting to see, there were a lot of cancellations as far as season tickets were concerned. If that 2,000 person or 2,000 strong season ticket wait list actually materializes, because a lot of people seem to have dropped, and more so than what we would normally expect. So my question for the poll this week is, did you cancel? And if you canceled, did you get a refund? Because it's been a mixed bag with UCF's stated policy on refunds, states that it says specifically that games that have been played, you don't get refunds on. They don't say anything about season ticket holders, and it seems there's been a lot of pushback. So there may be a problem there as well. So look out for that this week. And with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to UCF Hoops. So UCF Hoops in the first round of the Big 12 tournament won against Utah 87-72, and then followed that up with a tough game against Kansas. But let's talk about that Utah game a little bit. We talked about it last week, didn't know what to expect. The biggest thing that we were worried about was their bigs, right, in their front court, because they have a very, very tall team, and also shutting down their three-point shooter. Here's the crazy thing. UCF came out on fire in this game. DJ has been playing lights out. The team went 29 of 53 and shot 54.7% from from the field goal range versus Utah's 39.7. 54.7 is, I think, the highest we've had all year, and then turned around and shot 41.7% behind the arc, which is, that's pretty crazy. And DJ, Darius Johnson, he went 2 for 5 this game. Niels Mahowski went 3 for 6 from the field goal range, at 2 for 5 from behind the arc. So it's pretty interesting to see that. And then Juice had some daggers in this game versus Utah. So it was good to see Juice back. He'd been out, and he's part of our triple threat as far as offense goes. Free throw percentage, we shot 73%, which is a little low for us. We got out-rebounded. We out-rebounded them on defense. They out-rebounded us on offense. But in the end, we came out on top. So this was a real interesting game, because it actually, considering how we played against Utah the first 2 games, I didn't know how this one was going to go. And this one actually gave me a little confidence going into Kansas, because, as I said early on, I thought this was the best road for us best path for us to go a little deeper in the Big 12 tournament. Did you guys have any thoughts on that Utah game?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. That was when I was out of town in Jamaica, and I'm watching. I can't stream outside of the country. Yeah, I know, so sad for me. But I'm watching the GameCast on the ESPN app, and you see the first half. Utah has a small lead throughout some of it, and I think at halftime it was whatever it was, maybe a 2, 3, 4 point game, somewhere in that range. And then I look back, looks like Utah was up 1 point at the end of the first half, looking here. Then all of a sudden I look a few minutes in to the second half, and UCF's all of a sudden on like a 20-2 run. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? I mean, it's interesting that, not that Utah is the pillar of success in basketball this year, but
well, not according to Utah fans. They are the pillar of success, and they were too good for the Big 12. Remember?
Yeah, and then they finished 16-16 and 8-12 in the Big 12. But it was good to see that kind of that offensive explosion by UCF there. I mean, you wonder where that is at times. I mean, if they can do that against, granted, a mediocre team, put up 87, outscore Utah 48-32 in the second half. You wish you would have seen that against some of these bigger games they had where, they had to lead, but then the offense would just stall out. And I know the defense had its problems, which we've talked about many times, but, you would see the offense stall out there in the last 3, 4, 5 minutes of the game as we got later into the second half of the year. And, if you think if that could have happened a couple more times, we're in a completely different spot. But it was, I feel like UCF is notorious for
when you're shooting 41% from behind the arc versus the 20 that we've been shooting the past, like, I don't know what it's been like the last 6-7 games in Big 12 play.
we're a streaky team.
20%. You're right. And so early on in the season, in the mid part of the season, when we were finding success, we had to have that 3-point shot to loosen up. And the reason for it is so that teams would have to come out to the arc to guard the arc, and that would open up our slashers. Well, not slashers, but our one-on-one game, like Keyshawn Hall, right? And one of the biggest challenges with Keyshawn Hall is when he is not a point guard. So if the lane is clogged and he has the ball, he's going to go for it no matter what, trying to draw a foul or trying to get to the hoop. And lately, people have been double teaming him because he's the leader in scoring offense in the Big 12. And so he did too much, and he would dribble right into double teams and not pass out of it successfully. And so we needed that 3-point weapon, or that 3-point threat, to be able to space out the floor a little bit and give him some room to do what he does best.
Agree with you. I think it also, it hurts UCF that they don't have much of an inside game. Obviously, other than Chiam, there's not much of a, inside out kind of game there. They don't have really anyone that could throw it in there besides him. They don't have a big team per se. And they kind of live and die by the three. We've seen this in the NBA, like most recently I could think of the Houston Rockets, when they had James Harden and Eric Gordon and Trevor Ariza and all these guys that could just hit three after three. But when you're missing, you live and die by the three. Kind of makes you a little bit one dimensional. And I mean, Darius Johnson had a fantastic year. He shot 41% from three. I mean, Keyshawn Hall, 35%. But, other than that, there was guys like, Jordan Ivy Curry and some of these JJ Taylor, some of these guys that can hit the three, but not super consistently and reliable as much as you'd want them to. And it felt like as a team, we were pretty streaky from three, and we lived and died by three, which is okay. It can work. I mean, going back to that Rockets example, they made it to the conference finals that year, but it eventually kind of fizzles out if you're not going to be too consistent with it. But it was good to see first round win, but all that to just kind of end up exactly the same as last year. 17 wins last year, 17 wins this year. Won the first round of the conference tournament last year, same thing this year. So frustrating that all that good start, that goodwill we built up, only to pretty much end in the same spot. But at least we did get one more win, and maybe that secured us the the postseason bid that we'll talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah, and Juice was hurt. People don't realize this, but about a little after halfway through the season, Juice was hurt, and then we had Sellers out. So without those two, Sellers is a big threat from beyond the arc, and he can also handle the rock, and he distributes well. And I think with that pressure and him being hurt, I think that hurt Juice's game, because you saw him the last two games when he played Kansas, when he came back after being out for a few days, and Utah. He played a lot better and was more of a threat offensively, and got hot and started heat checking behind the arc, right? And that was something we were missing. So Sellers definitely was a big loss for us. We went with a smaller roster this year, hoping that we had more of that guard play. We had Chim, but we really didn't have anybody behind him. Benny Williams started off strong early in the season, like when we played Texas Tech and all of that kind of stuff. He has a good spot. He has a good shot when he's about 10 to 12 feet from the rim, but he wasn't getting any minutes. And so he just kind of cooled down, and I don't know what it was. I mean, this guy came from Q's. It's not like he's a bad basketball player, right? But he just was not in rhythm or in sync with the team at all, and just provided no help with Rokas being out and injured. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Kansas. Now, this game was a game that I was a little worried about because again, the front court that Kansas has, they just I was worried about them, especially with Hunter Dickinson and how he played the first game that he played against us. Obviously, it was a lot closer in the second game. This game, he was 9 for 18 from field goal range and 3 from 4 from the 3-point line. Now, he was pretty quiet the first half of this game. The second half, he really came alive. But I also think that there were a lot of things that Hunter Dickinson was allowed to get away with. And there were a lot of things that they did not call him on that they should have. This one felt a little bit more like the refs had more skin in the game and keeping Kansas going. But we played till the end of the game. We really could have won that game. The last momentum swing really was when DJ went out. He had a technical foul, and then he fouled out at the end of the game. So we tied the game. At the end, we had an opportunity to kind of take the lead. Momentum swung. The last waning seconds, momentum swung back in our way. Keyshawn Hall had a opportunity. For some reason, as good as he is as a one-on-one player, he doesn't seem to be as good in transition and handling the ball. Basically lost his handles, went out of bounds, and it ended up a tie game. So now we go into overtime. And this is where playing back-to-back games really hurt UCF. You saw some shots being short, some air balls, free throws, etc. The guy's legs were gone in overtime. I don't know if you watched it. It looked like they put their last effort in trying to win the game and ended up as a tie, and then their legs were gone. They still played well, 42% again from behind the arc, although Kansas was 44%. Field goal percentage, 45.6 versus Kansas's 44.7. So the guys belonged on the court. And I'll say this about that. It wasn't too long ago, that we had Keith Clanton as our hero. You know what I mean? Or Isaiah Sykes. And now we're playing Kansas in the Big 12 championship. So the reason I say that is because the expectations at UCF, the fact that we're playing at the Big 12, have gone up, right? And when we went into the basketball season last season, we were like, okay, maybe we get 2 or 3 wins. But that early season really hurt. But this game, I think they showed if you can play KU in the Big 12 tournament, lose 98-94, could have had the game won at the end of regulation and played as well as we did, that bodes well for what UCF could be. And that's really what this game said to me, is what UCF could be in hoops and what our expectations should be. And that's why I think a lot of people, when we talk about that 75% poll, it's like, what's the next step with regard to Dawkins? So, Trey, unfortunately, we did not make the NCAA tournament. So that Elite Eight that you were predicting didn't happen. Anything else? Any other observations from the game against Kansas?
Yeah, I mean, again, another close game against Kansas. We obviously had that one later in the season that ended in heartbreak. And I mean, look, they fought really hard. And it was good to see they didn't just lay down and get blown out. But Kansas obviously is not the Kansas of last year or even in previous years. They were obviously nowhere near as good as that, but they're still a blue blood program. They fought hard. It was frustrating though. Even if they would have won that game, which would have been awesome, and they made it to the next round, we knew they had a big climb to win the whole Big 12 tournament. But what's frustrating is that was just another game that they were close in to the end and could not close out. I mean, that's what got really frustrating. Before we had that long 7-game losing streak, or even during that losing streak, at least in the beginning of it, there was all those games where whether it was Houston, Kansas, whatever it was, we were in it the whole game, had leads at multiple points, trading baskets back and forth, but just couldn't close it out. It'd been nice to finally do that, especially, we had some momentum, beat Utah, and then Kansas, obviously not the powerhouse this season they are in previous years or most years. It'd been nice to finally just close one out. But, they couldn't do it. But, at least it was not some sort of embarrassing blowout.
Well, yeah, like a 50 plus
Correct.
point loss to Kansas. I mean, I still scratch my head at that game. They even mentioned that in, when they were calling this game, it was like, we don't know how that happened. And, the frustrating thing I think for UCF basketball right now is exactly what you say. And this game kind of encapsulates it, right? It's like, what's going to get us to that next level where we're starting to win some of these games? Because there's teams that are terrible and lose all the time. Yes, we got blown out once this year, but we were in every single game. So what's the next step forward for UCF basketball, right? That's the next question. And what's the timing on that? So short term, the next step is we will be playing in the postseason. So, we are used to the NIT. We've been in the NIT. We've had some exciting games in the NIT. But there's this new thing called the College Basketball Crown Tournament. So those of you that haven't heard about it, it's basically a Fox invitational, a Fox-sponsored invitational. It was supposed to be a requirement for the Power 4 teams that are participating in the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the ACC, that if you did not, the top 2 contenders that did not make it to the tournament got auto bids to the Crown. The something that's a little bit different about the Crown as well. It's played in Las Vegas. This is the first year. They are playing NIL to the players, so the guys are getting paid for playing in that, and that's going to be important when we talk about the timing. And then the other thing that's interesting with this is there's a $2 million for whoever wins. There's a $2 million NIL payment basically that goes to the winning team, as well as all of the expenses are covered, unlike the NIT. So if you look and see what the tournament looks like, K-State declined, Indiana declined the participation, which we didn't think that was possible because the conference is decided there. Tim says, not the big dance, but the middle school dance. There's the chance for the Elite 8 of that dance. So we're talking, we're calling it the 8th grade dance, I guess. The Elite 8 and the 8th grade dance, or the Sweet 16 of the 8th grade dance, if we want to call it that. Our first game, we're going to be taking on Oregon State in the first round. I will say this, when you go back and look at the NIT teams that are participating, right? It's pretty much all mid-major teams, right? It's all G5 teams. Now they're good teams, but they're all G5 teams outside of OSU and a couple of others, Stanford, SMU, which, and then there was one more. And it's surprising to me that they accepted, but they did. We are playing Oregon State in the first round. What do you guys think about the Basketball Crown Tournament as far as playing in it?
Shoot, I told Ben, I said, if we win, that's $2 million in NIL that we never have had. I mean, I don't know what the basketball budget is as far as NIL. Ben said it's not $2 million.
That would be, let me put it to you this way. That would put a significant dent towards buying players next year. Let's just put it that way.
And I think why if that's, say we retain Johnny Dawkins, and I think that's his last year's next year, if I'm not mistaken, like on the contract extension he signed. He's gonna want to buy his the best team possible. He's not gonna want to start off with younger guys. He's gonna want to try to keep the guys he has now that don't leave or go to the draft or transfer, and run it back and try to get a little bit more talent. So I think there's incentive in playing for it. Obviously, my Elite 8 hopes, this is hinging on that. But
So you're still calling the Elite Eight just the wrong Elite Eight?
correct. So there's 16, so we have to win at least one game to make the Elite Eight. I'm not going to be wrong.
You have to win one game to get to the Elite Eight, and the teams that are participating are Cincinnati, Oregon State, UCF, Colorado, USC, Tulane, Nebraska, Arizona State, Georgetown, Washington State, GW, Boise State, Fresno, and Utah. So it's interesting. There's a lot of Big 12 teams in here, one Big 10 team, a lot of former Pac-12 teams, whether they're currently in the Big 12 or in the current, I don't want to say, I don't know how I would say that. They're still in the Pac, whatever it's going to be, right? But they kind of got left behind and no longer a power conference team. So I think this field is a lot better than if we would have played in the NIT. I think it's great that we're in the inaugural one. The only trouble I have really with playing in this, given how our season ended, is the timing. So our first game isn't until April 1st. This tournament is timed to be in between the break and the NCAA tournament and the championship game. There's a week, break in there. So I think it's good because people are going to be excited about the NCAA tournament. There's going to be a week break where there's no basketball that can slot in here. But the problem with that is the transfer portal will be open for a week before then. So there's a possibility that a lot of these teams will lose players in between the time that the window opens and the time that we actually play our first game. So it'll be interesting to see what the roster looks like. I think guys like Darius Johnson, obviously they're going to be there. Those seniors will have another opportunity to play, but there's going to be a lot of guys that may not be on the team at that point. That's the interesting thing. The other thing that's interesting about this is, what does this say about Johnny Dawkins, right? Because by that point, that window will have been open long enough for coaches, and it kind of makes you think that basically Johnny Dawkins is going to get that final year of his contract. We debated ad nauseum for 2 weeks whether we thought it was the right move to move on, and even Ben, who's been the Dawkins supporter, has said now's the time, right? 75% of you believe now's the time, but this makes it seem, given that, I mean, Terry can still go look for coaches and wait for Dawkins to finish his run, but it makes it seem like they're bringing Johnny Dawkins back next year. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, just to comment.
And the at-large team called the Villages All-Star 75 and Over School. Yeah, they come with their own golf carts in tow, right? So you don't have to worry about transportation from the airport. Everybody gets a golf cart and they roll into Vegas like ballers. All right. Go ahead, Alan. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was going to say, I mean, just on the college basketball crown, I mean, like you said, the NIT is mostly mid-majors. I think there was 4 power 4 teams in the entire NIT. So clearly that has taken a backseat just in 1 year from this Fox Invitational, where I don't know what the percentage is, but there was a good amount of the 16 teams that were power 4. There's a few non-power schools like Boise and a couple others. But, I think, why would you not accept the bid, right? It seems like it's quickly becoming the second best. I mean, if teams are essentially choosing the NIT, or sorry, this over the NIT, plus the prize money that you alluded to, clearly there's at least somewhat intrigue and some prestige there. And if UCF managed to win it, I think you could make the case it would arguably be a top 2, top 3 accomplishment in UCF basketball history, especially if you're beating multiple Power 4 schools on the way to winning that championship. Obviously, it's nowhere near like an NCAA, March Madness, tourney run or anything, but it would be still a good accomplishment. In terms of Johnny, yeah, I'd agree with you. It does seem like this lines up for him to return for another year. That seems to be where the tide is turning. It did seem for a while that he was gone. Multiple people talked about on this show. We talked about, most of us had agreed for the most part that we felt, it was the end of his run here at UCF, but it does seem that he will return for another year. I said I thought that his time was up, but one extra year at this point, I don't think it's preventing UCF from accomplishing anything amazing if he returns. If you got whoever the theoretical coach would be next year, if we did, move on from Johnny, it's not like they're going to have some miracle year one turnaround where UCF wins the Big 12, in my opinion.
They might. I mean, if NIL, seriously, let me put it to you this way: the NIL and the transfer portal, what it is, they could go out and go get a bunch of hired guns. I mean, that's basically what Kentucky did for years, right? And so now we're part of the Big 12. We're going to have NIL and we're going to have rev share at that point. The interesting thing to me is, from Terry's perspective, we said last week, Ben and I were talking about this, that Ben felt, and I agreed with him, that Terry would have to say something. This extends, this extends that time frame out, because if I'm Terry Mohajir and I've already made the decision to keep Johnny, which is what this says to me, then I'm hoping that Johnny makes it a little ways into the Crown tournament, wins a game or two in the Crown, two preferably in the Crown tournament if he doesn't win at all, as a kind of to soften that blow. Because otherwise, like we said last week, Knight Nation is at a point where they're ready to say goodbye and part ways in an amicable way, right? Not like, hey, don't let the door hit you on the way out, or hey, we're going to leave you on the tarmac kind of thing in Las Vegas, right? But in an amicable way. And this extends that timeline and gives him an off ramp if that's the decision that's been made. So I don't expect to hear anything, a vote of confidence for Johnny Dawkins or anything until after the Crown run, whatever that's going to be, is complete. And I expect Terry to be hoping that he wins at least 2 games.
My question I have is, say Johnny comes back next year. If he has a really good season, do we do this cycle again? Like, say he gets, like you said, you get the hired guns. I'm not saying we win the Big 12, but say we play those close games we lost this year turn into wins, and we're in the tournament, but we lose round 1. What do we do?
Are you asking what I would do or what Terry's going to do?
What do you think?
That's 2 different things.
I know what I would do, and I know what you would do. Like, what do you think Terry does? Because I think by bringing Johnny back, it leaves the door. Like, yes, we think, lame duck, whatever. But unless Johnny's like, I'm leaving, I want to leave, it leaves the door open if he goes on a run to where UCF is stuck. I mean, I remember having this conversation last year. It was like, should we extend Johnny Dawkins? Like, I remember that was one of the conversations. You're like, we need to, cut ties now and go on. And then we extended him. And, I think could that be the cycle? Because, and this is another thing. I'm not, this is definitely a question for you and Ben. Like, who do we bring in? Like, yeah, we cut ties with football.
We don't know who's going to be available. I mean, there's
like, who would we even target? Like what would be
this year or next year?
What would be the perfect UCF candidate for? Because I'm not in tune with that.
There's not to me, and I'll let Ben answer this kind of next week. We were kind of waiting to have the hot seat conversations until after the season was over, right? But like for me, there's a couple of interesting names out there, but they've all got baggage. One of them's got a show cause, but he would be a winner right away. Will Wade, right? You bring Will Wade in, he's doing great things at the G5 level again because he's an awesome coach. He just didn't play by the rules, and he's got a show cause, right? Mm-hmm. So there's gonna be guys like that. As far as up and comers, we don't know yet. I mean, there's a lot of teams that will do well a year or two that have a promising coach that's done well that you can bring in. And it's really that strategy. Do you try to bring in somebody like a Will Wade? Or do you try to bring in an up-and-comer? I mean, if it were me, considering we're the Big 12 and we're trying to win now and the fact that another contract cycle is coming up, and you see that 14 out of 16 SEC teams made the tournament.
Crazy.
There's no way on God's green earth that 14 out of 16 SEC teams should have made that tournament, let alone
it just means more, Ben.
Let alone West Virginia being left out for the likes of UNC, who had one quad one win. One quad one
Should
win.
have made the tournament too.
Who?
SMU. I thought they should have made the tournament. They were like 14-6 in the ACC, which I know the ACC wasn't. It was kind of a down year, but I mean they were 22-10 or something like that, and they didn't get into the tournament. And like you said, 14 teams. The SEC was historically strong this year. I will give them that compared to the rest of their basketball history.
14 out of 16 teams.
100%. 100%.
I mean, the Big 12 only, we were getting 8 to 9 out of 12 teams, right? But there's no way West Virginia should have been left out of the tournament. And I think it is a sign of the times to come. And one of the things that, that our commissioner has been talking about has been the fact that, we need to be boning up on our basketball product, because he's going to try to monetize that as a way to stay relevant and as a way to stay as a power conference. I really think that, Villanova was one of the teams that he was looking at. Villanova's playing in the tournament with us, but there's no way that West Virginia, with their resume versus UNC or even Texas or some of the other schools that were brought in there, that they should have been bumped out of the tournament. And there's no way that 14 out of 16 SEC teams should have made the tournament. There's no way. I can't see a valid argument for 14 out of 16 teams making the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
I mean, 14. None of them were that good. And the basketball is not that great either. The basketball is not that great. If you actually watched any of these SEC teams, yes, they have athletes, but the basketball sucks. I think they're going to get smoked in the tournament. I mean, early on, probably not, because you have lower seeds that just barely squeak by. But I think most of those teams are going to be put out pretty early. Auburn, obviously, the exception. They've got a solid team. They've been in the top 5-10 all year round. But again, West Virginia should not have been left out. It should not have happened. And honestly, if this is a trend, then that just goes to show how much influence the SEC basically runs the NCAA at this point. And that's not okay. They've already got outsized influence on football. They shouldn't have the same on basketball. And it brings up another thing too. The head of the committee that selects people for the NCAA tournament, guess whose AD that was? Alan, this is where you guess.
Who's AD? Sorry.
Whose AD leads this year, led the selection committee for the NCAA tournament?
The SECs?
No, UNC's.
Really?
Yeah. So the guy who's the AD for UNC, who West Virginia got bumped for, who had one quad one win the entire season, makes the tournament? Really?
Yeah.
But he stepped out of the room. He stepped out of the room, right? So obviously there was no influence there whatsoever. It's ridiculous. I think, honestly, I understand having some sort of influence from the ADs in selection committees, but they should not be the head of the committee. This smells so fishy. It's as bad as what we were talking about this in the text talk. The NCAA has been doing much better, right, as far as fairness is concerned with the tournament relative to the playoff. And Tim makes a good point that I was going to make here in a minute. Tim says UNC is aiming to get into the Super League and is trying to up their market value as a sales pitch. I don't even think yes, and the SEC, there was a recent article that came out on who the SEC is targeting. UNC is a target of the SEC, also the Big Ten, but the SEC as well. So, I mean, are they helping the SEC teams getting 14 out of 16 in there? I don't know. I don't want to be a conspiracy theory, but I do think that it's not kosher that the head of the committee is UNC, is the UNC admin, and they had one quadrant win and they got over West Virginia. And that scares me for the rest of the Big 12, to be honest with you, because if that SEC influence starts creeping its way, and Greg Sankey, the James Bond villain of college athletics, more like Darth Maul, Tim, more like Darth Maul. If he starts coming in there, he's already said he doesn't like the NCAA. He doesn't like the way it's managed, etc. I don't like this at all. And one more thing that I'm going to bring up about the NIT. The NIT field plus South, the NIT field invited South Alabama. So they were invited on the night that it was unveiled, and then they uninvited them. That's crap. Shout out to South Alabama. You didn't deserve that. All right, let's talk a little bit. Let's talk something a little bit more positive and talk a little UCF baseball. So UCF baseball beats Miami. So it was a little prophetic in what I said about UCF beating Miami. But not only did they beat them 14-4. UCF baseball in the hierarchy of the state of Florida, they beat Florida handily. We beat the Cows. Now we've beat Miami. I think that we are a strong number one, number two. FSU has a great baseball team. They're playing really well. But UCF has asserted itself within the state of Florida as far as baseball is concerned. It was a great win. The Bats continued their dominance, and our pitching staff did. We turned around and played that game, and then we went to play at BYU. So, Alan, it was snowing. They had a snow delay. They had rain delays. It was boring for a while. Game 1, UCF wins. Game 2, UCF took a late lead and then lost it in the 9th inning. And then game 3, on BYU's heated field with snow blowing sideways, we had a dramatic late inning win and ended up winning 9-8 with comeback with strong bats. First question: should we have to play that early in a place like that? Even the announcers were asking, what did we do who did we peeve off at the Big 12 offices to have us play that early in that cold of weather?
That's extremely rare, non-common, essentially.
Yeah, it's extremely rare. And especially for a warm weather team to play like that, it does affect everything, including the pitching, right? So the hitting was pretty good. The pitching, however, was a little lackluster, especially in this last game. It was good to see Staggs get out there and have another good start. He dominated. So Stagliano, we were expecting him to be our Friday night guy. He came out, he got beat, got hit pretty early on. He kind of looked like Stagliano was losing a little bit of his luster. He took some time off, came back. He's played in a few games and now started this game, and he looks dominant again. So I'm really, really happy about that. Our pitching staff that was so good, our bullpen that was so good. We had Castellanos out there. We had, a few others out there. They looked so good. Did not look as good in this game. And a lot of that has to do with cold. It affects mechanics. It affects strength. Your body's aching. We had 3 errors in this game. We overcame 3 errors to come back and win this game 9-8. Uncharacteristic errors because our defense has been good all year long. Things like balls dropping the mitts and then dropping the ball, things like that you wouldn't see from a UCF team. So it definitely had a big impact. And we certainly shouldn't have been playing in the pouring down rain and or the snow. Now, I'm glad we did, and they didn't cancel the game because we ended up with the series win. We almost swept. And the other thing that I really think that this did, which is a good thing for UCF baseball, is it did two things. One, it showed that this team has the bats to win in the late innings. There's been a lot of games this year that we've been behind. As tough as this weather was, this team came back and won in the late innings. And I think that will help long term. And lastly, they have the grit. They have the grit to show that they will win these types of games in tough series, in tough situations. And the more and more of these that we get, the better it bodes for this UCF team as it goes into the postseason. Tim says UFOs, Bigfoot, JFK, Magic Bullet, and the NCAA Selection Committee, all valid conspiracies. Yes, I am glad to contribute to the conspiracy theories that the vaulted big four of conspiracy theories. But that being said, I was really happy to see this team win. I really do think that this is going to strengthen the team. And now everybody's asking the question, why is UCF not ranked? So I want to talk about that. One thing is there's no Big 12 teams at all ranked, which I do think is kind of odd. We have some very solid teams with decent RPIs, et cetera, and good wins. UCF's RPI is not very high. UCF's RPI is in the 30s. It was 31 to 33 the last time I checked. And the reason that is because we played a lot of home games. The way the RPI works is they weight away games much more heavily. They weight strength of schedule. We played a lot of home games early, and we played a lot of teams with not strong RPIs themselves. So we're kind of digging ourselves out of a hole with regard to the RPI, and it's heavily weighted. You look like a team like Xavier, who played a lot of really highly rated and ranked teams early on. Their RPI is much higher, and they're ranked in the top 10 because of it, right? It's not about the quality of baseball that's being played early on the season, especially when it comes to RPI. It has to do with who you've played and where you've played, because the wins at home just simply don't count as much in that calculation, right or wrong, right? So they don't hurt as much when you're away, but they help a whole heck of a lot more. And we just haven't played a lot of away games. The BYU series was the first one that we've played outside of the state of Florida. So, that will catch up. There's one metric that has us in the top 25, one metric that has West Virginia in the top 25, but no other Big 12 teams in the top 25. But I expect that to change as the season wears on. And UCF went they went into the season, lost votes, but then have regained the votes. So we're getting about 7 votes. We win this next series that we play. We have Stetson on the road at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow on midweek for our midweek game, and then we have a series coming up after that. We just got to win. If you win, that ranking will come. These players are good. They've overcome a lot during the season. We've got a good defense. I still believe in our bullpen, even though it wasn't the greatest showing when we were BYU. I mean, it was heart attacks. Like literally, we were up. We were up 5 runs, and then in the 9th, we just could not get the BYU guys out. They ended up making it within 1, and then our guys pulled it out with a double play to end the game. So I was really worried about that in the 9th, but we came away with the win. Okay. With all of that being said, let's go ahead, and I want to give some shout outs and listener love. New followers. I don't know how to say this right, so please don't take this the wrong way. Gupperco or Jupperco. At Sally Dozlowski and at Statboy Drew. Most of you have heard of Statboy Drew. He's started following us, and he knows what he's talking about. Actually worked with Nightline back in the day, and very happy to have him aboard. So welcome to those new followers. Make sure you're liking, sharing, subscribing, retweeting, telling your friends about our show. All right. with that being said, Alan, do you have an oxymoronic stat of the week? We missed yours last week while you were off having Mai Tais in Jamaica. Do you have one for us this week?
I do have just a small one about UCF men's basketball that, nothing crazy here, but it was interesting. I'm looking here at these last two seasons, and, obviously, like I kind of said earlier, I said some of my stat, but we were, had identical win total overall wins with 17 wins this year and last year. And we had identical wins in the conference, 7 wins in both. But what really sticks out to me is the difference in the really both defensively and offensively. So last year, we were able to get some of those big conference wins, those big conference upsets. We averaged 71 points a game last year, which was 236 out of 362, D1 basketball programs. Or defensively, we gave up 67, just about 68 points, per game last season, which ranked us 66th in the country. And then you look at this year, and it kind of essentially flipped. We averaged nearly 8 more points a game this year, just under 80 points a game, which put us in the top 50 in the country. So our offense dramatically improved, obviously, getting guys like Keyshawn here, and, Darius Johnson had a really good year offensively, made a big difference. But then defensively, we gave up over 11 more points per game at 80.1, which ranked us 345th in the country out of 364 teams. So interesting how that flipped, that kind of dichotomy there, where our offense improves dramatically and our defense, just devolves dramatically. And you still get to the 7 wins and the 17 wins overall. I mean, you would think even if UCF gave up 3, 4, 5 less points a game, our win total could have easily been in the 20s. So it really just this year just flipped offensively and defensively. And normally we're not this good, top 50 in the country offensively. Defense has been more the staple under Johnny, but it really just, went to crap this year, with giving up 80 points a game. And I think that was, you saw when you start to look at the point totals game by game by game. Obviously, in the non-conference play, there's going to be some of the easier teams where they don't give up much, but you just see game by game by game, it gets more and more. We're giving up in the 90s, sometimes in the hundreds. And that to me was really the difference maker in the season.
When you're talking about this too, you talked about what we did that was the same year over year, right? So the other thing where we got a little bit worse was our quad 1 wins, right? So we had 5 in 2024. One of them was quad 1A, and the rest was quad 1 in 2024. In 2025, we had 4 quad 1 wins, 1 quad 1A, and 3 quad 1 wins. So, and we had the opportunities for a lot more. That's the crazy thing, and I think that's what makes this so frustrating. Is this season was so close, and they were good enough to win these games, but they just didn't. And so, at some point, the law of averages comes into play, right? If you've got a team that's good enough to win against these quad 1 teams and they lose, where do you point the finger? If everything's consistent, to me, it's got to be the coaching, right? That's the difference. Especially if you've got a team that is that close to winning those games. Again, agree. We knew we were going to be a better offensive team, but yeah, defense was pretty much abysmal, and rebounding was too, and it was lack of effort. Yes, one size didn't help us, right? Because we've always had a very, very solid front court with a lot of size, and we didn't have that much of it this year. But I still would have expected a Johnny Dawkins coach team to have more of a defensive effort and defensive success. All right. We do not have Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week because we do not have Josh this week. He is out in California. He just recovered from the fever. Thankfully, he's on the mend. If you listened last week, you knew that he was sick. But we do have a quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. So, as a reminder, women's basketball season is over. We talked about them last week and how that ended. Women's tennis is now up to number 17. They beat Iowa State in straight sets 4-0. They also beat number 40 Kansas 4-1. Next up is Colorado on the 21st and number 14 Texas Tech. So that'll be a good test for our ladies. They are now 14-1. Which is pretty amazing, and they're doing extremely well. Great bounce back from where they were. Number 19 men's tennis lost to number 2 TCU 2-4. They then beat number 10 Arizona 4-3, which was a huge win. Remember last week they were number 13, but they are now number 19. They're currently 15-5. And next they play at number 71 BYU on the 21st, followed by number 52 Utah. UCF softball, unfortunately, has fallen out of the rankings. The last time we were together, they were number 25. They are no longer ranked. They are 20-11-1. They dropped out after losing the series at home to Arizona State 1-2. They lost the first game pretty handily, came back and won the second game 11-1, and then lost, unfortunately, the third game. Up next, they've got Iowa State at home on the 20th. So that will do it for us for the show. Just some comments real quick. I just want to thank everyone. Thanks, Tim, for chiming in. We love it, especially your theories about UFOs, Bigfoots, JFK, and the magic bullet. We appreciate everyone's support. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following. Make sure you're giving us feedback. If you like the videos or there's something you like, make sure you comment on the things that we put out, participate in the poll, and obviously participate during the show. It's why we do it live. As always, we appreciate everything that you do. Alan, welcome back. I hope you have plenty of calamine lotion, or not calamine lotion, aloe for your sunburns. Go Knights and... Alan? Okay. Well, did you say it? We just couldn't hear it. Is that what that was?
Probably a volume issue.
Okay, it was a volume issue. So we've got to get Alan more excited at the end of the show. Thank you guys. And as always, we'll see you next week. Charge on, baby.